Hello, and welcome to the Built to Be Human podcast brought to you by Functional Living Academy. I'm your host and guide, Liam Gallagher. So, a couple weeks back, I talked about built to eat real food. So today, I figured I'd cover the topic of what ultra processed foods are. Um, if you really look back at history, even back to the 1900 itself, foods only lasted a couple of days up to a week. They had very rudimentary uh, ways of making foods last a little longer. Things like drying, salting, fermenting, and pickling were about the standard that there was. There was no real way of getting foods to last for several months or a year. Not easily, anyhow. There are a couple of techniques that I've come across over the years that do work, but it was more done through ingenuity and know-how as opposed to Franken-science and who knows what they're up to now. So, what exactly is a processed food? So, a processed food is any food that's been altered from its natural state, its usual state. They typically contain sugar, oil, salt, or some other substance that have been added to it. Um, Ultra processed foods are foods that have been processed and they also have additional things added to it. Things like artificial colors and flavorings, um, preservatives for shelf stability, ingredients to preserve texture, and they're really damaging. Yeah, it might be able to stay on a shelf for a year, but that doesn't mean that it's something that we really need to ingest. So, some of the things that I avoid entirely, I obviously I read a lot of food labels, um, and a couple of the things that I do to ensure that the food I'm eating is as minimally processed as possible is, well, first of all, I shop at a health food store and at farmers markets. Um, and I do look at food labels, as I've said. And what I'm looking for on a food label is a handful of things. I do my best to only eat foods with five or fewer ingredients. Now, if something has an ingredient in it that is broken down into further ingredients, I only count that the main ingredient that they're listing. So like a cheese. Cheese are going to list milk and enzymes, etc. I won't include all those additional ones. But I will look at a product, and if I cannot pronounce something in the ingredient list, I'm not going to eat it. If I see something like high fructose corn syrup or just corn syrup or anything hydrogenated, I'm definitely not going to eat it. There's a reason for this, and I talked about it in my previous podcast. The reality is these highly processed foods are basically filler. There's no real nutrient content to it. We're not actually satiated with it. We might be full for a short period of time, but we're not actually getting any benefit from eating it. And lo and behold, there's a tremendous amount of damage that could be done by eating it. So I do my best to avoid it. I've avoided it for years. I really struggle at this point to go out to eat with friends. I need to be able to decide where we're eating, or I'm probably not going to go because I'm not even able to put some of this food into my body at all at this point because I haven't eaten it in so long. My body gets shocked. You know, I was talking to somebody the other day and they were talking about cooking frogs, and you have to put the frogs in the water when the water is cool so that it's gradually heating up and the frog that won't jump out. If you put a frog in hot water, it's going to jump out immediately. And when I look at the people around me and the food that they eat, I kind of think of the same scenario. They've been eating this food for so long and it's changed incrementally over the years that their bodies are deceived into thinking they know what to do with it. There's been so many small changes in their foods that they just have adapted to it. Now, it's been so many years since I've had commercial food that way that if I were to eat something like that, it would absolutely make me ill. It'd lay like a rock in my stomach, and I just would feel miserable for a couple of days, usually 3 or 4 days, before I was able to process it out. So, what sort of things happen when you're eating highly processed foods? Well, it really depends on the ingredients in the food, but if you're eating something that's hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated, that's really kind of damaging, because basically what can happen is if you eat enough of it or ingest enough of it, you can become hydrogenated yourself. In other words, your cells start to restructure themselves in a way that is not natural and not normal, but it's mimicking the products that you're ingesting. Um, another damaging thing that you find in a lot of ultra processed foods are called excitotoxins. The best known excitotoxin that I'm aware of is MSG. And essentially, what happens with excitotoxins, they're put in foods to make them more palatable, to make them slightly addictive, to give you that, to hit your pleasure sensors centers when you're eating food. The problem is they're so toxic that essentially what happens is it excites the cells of your brain to such an extent that they literally die. So that's not very that's not very appealing to me. Um, First of all, I'm not trying to eat something that isn't natural. Um, I used to eat Pop Tarts for blood sugar lows, and then I wasn't eating the brand Pop Tarts. I was eating a clean brand of it. And the one time I was out camping with some friends, and I had a Low, and I didn't have any of my own products on hand to eat to correct it. Somebody handed me an actual brand name Pop Tart, and I took one bite into this thing, and it actually, my jaw clenched. It like was almost painful to me. It was so sweet. It was so unnatural that I literally couldn't eat it at all. I was dying, and I was in a position that if I didn't eat it, I might have had some major problems. Instead of forcing it into my body, I literally went to 3 or 4 other campsites until I found somebody with some juice, or something, some sort of fruit or something that I could eat to correct my blood sugar. And then once I was through the blood sugar, I immediately went to the store and got something for sugar lows, because I realized that I can't, at this point, I really can't rely on just finding whatever's around, because I don't do well with it. So as I've gotten away from the highly processed foods, um, when I was younger, so a lot of the processed foods really started to come out in the 80s. There were some, obviously, there were some before that, but it really got big in the 80s. And that was my young years. I was born in the late 70s. So I kind of grew up on some of it. My mom did cook a lot from scratch, which I'm very grateful for. I don't think I've ever eaten a boxed potato in my life. All the mashed potatoes that I've ever made were made from potatoes, and it was made from scratch. Um, but as I've cleaned up my diet, and as it's been years and years and years since I've eaten that type of food, I'm shocked that people are still able to eat it. I was talking to a buddy of mine not long ago, and he was talking about having eaten McDonald's and how it really made him sick. He said, every time I eat McDonald's, it makes me sick. And I asked him, why do you keep eating it? He goes, because it tastes so good. And I said, well, okay, that makes sense to me, I guess. Not really. So that to me tells me how much added chemical that they're putting into the foods and how addictive it's become, that people who are getting sick eating something are still craving it, which blows me away. That completely bypasses the punishment and reward system in our body, the pleasure and punishment. I don't understand it at all. I have done really well with eating simple foods, preferably made in my own house, preferably made from scratch. And lo and behold, I haven't been sick in the last 10 years. I don't know many people that can say they haven't been sick for a decade, but I don't know that many people that are eating as clean as I am either. So some of the other things to look for in highly processed foods is any sort of artificial sweetener. Um, anything that you cannot pronounce is probably not something that you should put into your body. Anything that's got more than 5 or 6 ingredients probably isn't a good idea either. So any sort of sliced cheese is probably highly processed. Even canned tuna is considered processed because of the additives. So uh, sweetened breakfast cereals are terrible. yogurts with flavoring. Most yogurts with flavoring are highly processed. The reality is, at this point in the United States, there are more ultra processed foods in most grocery stores than there are whole foods, which is kind of terrifying. I don't understand why it's less expensive for me to buy a product that's been highly processed as opposed to one that hasn't. It doesn't logically make sense to me. If it's highly processed, then there's equipment, there's time, there's all kinds of things involved, whereas an apple just needs picked. So, not really sure. If you have any questions about I don't know how to read food labels, how to identify um, ingredients that indicate a highly processed food, I'd be happy to answer those for you. Just leave a note in the comment section, and I will do my best to get back to it at some point. So, I hope you guys have a good day, and I'll see you next week.